Welcome to another in the series of television shows presented by the Dennis Yarmouth Support Our Schools, also known as DYSOS. The purpose of these shows is to provide important information about the educational programs and initiatives of the Dennis Yarmouth School District and the broader educational and community issues that are relevant to our school district. DYSOS was founded by Dick McGarr in 2009. We're a group of citizens of Dennis and Yarmouth of varied ages and backgrounds who believe that a high-quality educational system is fundamental to the well-being of a community. Likewise, we feel that the quality of educational enterprise is enhanced by an informed public, hence these shows. My name is Crystal Gibbs, a retired public school and university teacher and administrator, currently the education coordinator at the Cultural Center of Cape Cod. I'm also a member of DYSOS, and I'll be your host for this show. We thank the staff and volunteers of Channel 99 and Richard Sentner, the producer of the show and a member of DYSOS, for making this series possible. The DYSOS shows run on Channel 99 on Mondays at 4 p.m. and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Previous shows can also be seen on the DY District TV Channel 22. This schedule of shows can be found on the DY website homepage by scrolling down to the Support Our Schools schedule. Our conversation today focuses on the German program at Dennis Yarmouth High School. Our panelists to my immediate right are Dawn Colton-Mund, German teacher and chair of the Foreign Language Department at DY Regional High School, and most distant from me, Tommy Datum, who is a 2005 graduate of DY and now a German teacher at the school, and students Dylan Miller, Lee Brown, and John Gallagher. Let's begin our conversation tonight with a discussion of the purpose of foreign language study in K through 12 education. With little certainty of the need for any particular language, since we know, of course, everyone speaks English all around the world, why study a language at all? And how does one choose which language to study from among those offered? Dawn, do you want to begin?
Yeah, well, I think that the globalization that everyone is so striving for today makes foreign language more and more important rather than less important. Certainly everyone, or many, many people in this world speak English today, but they don't necessarily do business in it. And that cultural aspect that is so important when communicating and interacting with other people will only come through the language itself. And I just read an article about this globalization and how the Americans are really quite well known for not speaking other languages, and how important it is that we finally wake up and realize that it is important for us to learn foreign languages.
Well, my word choice in my questions was not serious. I was being a little bit sarcastic about how we do think that all we need is our English.
Right.
And that's not so well received in other places as we would like it to be.
Right.
Now, you all study foreign languages, is that right?
That is right.
Tell me what you study, and also interested in having you talk a little bit about why you chose to study the languages you chose. Do you want to begin, John?
Yes, I actually started learning German freshman year. I had learned Spanish throughout middle school, but I decided to take German because it seemed to be a lot more of a business language than most others. I gravitated towards it. I guess maybe there weren't as many people in it in those classes. Maybe I was, kind of taking a road less taken, road less traveled.
Yeah.
You know? But it was like I did my research on it before I chose, and it's a very interesting language. It's a very interesting culture, and from these trips, it's been a very interesting country.
Yeah, for those of you in the audience, the students and their instructors have all been in Germany just a month or so ago, and we're going to talk a little bit about that trip and that experience too as we move through the program. John, how many years of German have you studied now?
I've studied 4 years now.
So you're about to graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have plans to continue to study German?
I'm truly hoping so. I have not totally dedicated myself to it yet, but I am definitely planning on learning it even further and possibly going there again.
Good. And Lee, how about you?
I'm currently enrolled in French and Spanish, so I take 2 languages. I started French in 6th grade. I chose it for immature middle school reason. I got a bad grade on a Spanish vocab test, so I said, okay, I'm taking French. So that's how I ended up taking French, but now I've been taking it since the 6th grade, so I've reached the highest level of it, and I don't regret it at all. And I started.
So how many years have you studied it?
Since the 6th grade. I'm in the level 5, so since the 6th grade, so technically about 7 years. But, and then I started taking Spanish in the 10th grade, because I just loved languages so much. I honestly have never taken a class that I thought was so cool that I could communicate with a whole country of people by learning their language. So I really wanted to pick up another language, and Spanish seemed like a good option at the time, because here where we live in America, there's a ton of people who speak that language. So I really wanted to be able to use it in life when I get older.
And do you use it at all outside of the classroom now?
Actually, funny thing, when I went to Germany, I was at a restaurant and the waitress only spoke German and Spanish, so I was able to order in Spanish in Germany, so that was cool. And there are instances, where I have Spanish-speaking friends who obviously they speak English, but they think it's funny to tease you in Spanish, and it's funny to get them back when you realize what they're saying, so definitely use it a lot.
But you haven't traveled to any country where Spanish is the language yet?
No, not yet.
Good. And how about you, Dylan?
I've taken French again since the 6th grade. Coming into high school, middle school you have a choice between French and Spanish, and I had chosen French just because I wanted to be different. Most kids chose Spanish. And coming into high school, I actually wanted to change languages, but my mother wouldn't let me because she thought I'd do better off if I took French. So I stuck with French for the 4 years of high school. I went to France last year, and I went to Germany this year, so I know some about both cultures, and it was a good time.
Good. And Tommy, tell us a little bit about your history of the study of language.
Well, when I was at Wixon Middle School, they offered German, French, and Spanish starting in the 6th grade, and I'm not sure to this day what quite prompted me to love German the way I do, but I always knew I wanted to take German, so I studied German from 6th grade to all the way through senior year with Frau Colton-Mund, and got to German 5, and I kind of took a German hiatus, at least academically, for the first couple of years of college, but after transferring a couple times, I ended up at UMass Amherst, which has a great German and Scandinavian studies department. And I majored in German, and I studied a little bit of Swedish while I was there. And just after I graduated, Don contacted me and asked me if I was certified to teach, which at the time I wasn't. But it's kind of just been my whole life since 6th grade has had at least a little bit to do with German in Germany. And I was also in high school on roughly the same exchange that we just did, except it was to a different town.
Different town at that time. Mm-hmm.
But we did visit outside the town we were at this time, and yeah.
And how long have you been teaching?
Just since September. I was a teaching assistant at UMass Amherst for a German conversational class, so that was really my only experience teaching it beforehand, but I really enjoy it.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the program that DY offers. What's the scope of the program now, and how many students are enrolled, and so on?
Right now, we offer German from 9th through 12th. That will change next year. I'm very happy to announce that the middle school, provided we find an instructor for it, will have German starting in the 6th grade next year. So our program is building, and it has been in the last years. It's gained in popularity. The kids really enjoy it. They come up to the high school, so they are able to right now to take 4 levels of German, 4 years. We have about 10% of our population, 10 to 15% of our population takes German. of the students that take foreign language. So we have between 85 and 100, depending on the year, and enrollments go up and down as everything else does. But yeah, we have about 10% that take German. So it's a great program. I have a lot of families actually involved with German. So I get brothers and sisters, and they all want to be involved in the German program, having experienced it somewhat with their brothers and sisters, whether they went on the exchange or participated in the German club that's very active at the high school. So yeah, that's our enrollment.
Is it typical that school districts in this part of the country offer German to the extent that DY does, and now, as you're saying, it's going to be available in the middle school?
Yeah. It's an excellent question, because German here in our area has dwindled over the last 20 years. So now we're, like I said, kind of gaining in popularity because, as John said, to do something different is what the kids are looking for. They're looking for something other than taking Spanish like everyone else does. And German affords that to them. And so, yeah, it's not. Here on the Cape, I believe Nauset still has a very small program, and one of the private schools, and that's it.
So another piece of the DY advantage.
It is, because I am convinced on college applications that having taken 4 years of German, as compared to everyone else taking 4 years of Spanish or French, is an advantage. I really do believe it is.
I want to follow up with you and maybe with Tommy on something that John said. He said that he considered business to be German to be more of a business language. Is that a generally shared perception that it, and I'm thinking about it in the context of Germany being a bit of a powerhouse in business and in science.
It is the economic heart of Europe, and technology. If you think about technology companies, you know, not too many Spanish or French come to mind.
Yeah.
The Germans, though, you know, Siemens, Nixdorf with the computers, SAP. That was a town that we visited where the SAP headquarters is. These big companies are there, as well as banking. Frankfurt is the banking central headquarters in Europe. So I believe he's right in saying it's business and economy. It is the language to learn.
And I always think of German as being a very important language in science. Is that still thought to be the case?
Yes. Well, again, some of the same companies, Siemens or BASF, any of the pharmaceutical companies, any of the science is all still based in Germany. Yeah.
Sometimes when I, for some reason, look at references for scientific articles, I see that many of them are printed in German.
Yeah. The printing, of course, you know, goes back to Gutenberg in Germany. It has a very, very long history. So I'm not surprised. Yeah, printing and publishing as well.
I just want to kind of fill in the picture of the study of foreign language at DY. Spanish, French, and German are available. Can one take Chinese?
We don't have Chinese at the high school, other than through our VHS program, the computer program where you can take online courses. I know some of my students have done that before for Chinese. Several students do that for Latin.
How about Japanese? Is that available through virtual high school?
Probably. I'm not quite sure. I do know that Chinese and Latin have been taken through the virtual high school.
And let's talk a little bit about foreign language enrollment as a whole at the high school. You mentioned that about 10% take German. When we add in Spanish and French,
Right.
what do we have?
Well, I just looked at my numbers so I would be able to speak about that today. We have, for instance, for next year, we have 865 requests for foreign language.
Does that include
Out
8th
of a
grade?
population of, we looking at 1,035 students next year.
I think
for the
that's
house.
remarkable.
So that's good 86% of our students are in foreign language. 2 years ago, I believe it was 2 or 3 years ago, we adopted the Mass Core, and the Mass Core requires 2 years of a foreign language to graduate high school, and that was new to us. And that too has, of course, boosted the enrollment, especially for the lower level courses, because everyone now is taking levels 1 and 2, and those that, you know, like Lee, who and John and Dylan, who are interested in foreign languages, will continue on to the upper levels.
So when we talk about 800 and whatever, 850-ish
Right.
requests for foreign language out of a population of about 1,000 students, what that means is that if everybody at the lower levels is taking, or at some grade level is taking the lower level classes, there are only about 150 students who either haven't started the language yet or have already finished their requirement.
Correct. Correct.
So do you have a number for how many continue on to 3rd or 4th levels?
I would guesstimate that about 30%, 30 to, might even be up to 40 on certain years, would continue on, yeah, from the numbers. Yes.
And how many do what Lee is doing, which is take 2 languages?
I just got that information today because we all know that that has been increasing since I've been here. I've been teaching now for 10 years, and when I started, I didn't know any students that took more than 1 language, and I was coming from a German high school where 2 languages are a minimum requirement. So, but today we have 18 to 20 students taking 2 languages. And I did have a couple of years ago a student who took all 3, and then went on to the University of Vermont to study linguistics. So he's the only one that I know so far that's taken all 3 languages.
I was, long ago, a middle school principal in a district here in Massachusetts where foreign languages were highly enrolled, both in the middle school and the high school, and it was very common for students to graduate with 5 years of 2 languages.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
And I see it coming for us with the 8th graders who we've had in the program now for 2 years. Those students will probably go beyond 5 years. Some of them, you know, completing AP, which we haven't been offering in the last couple of years. I see that returning quickly for these students.
Now, Lee, does it cost you something in terms of other courses you can't take when you take 2 languages?
For me, it personally doesn't. It just takes away from electives that I could take, which would be like any art classes, stuff like that. But to me, learning a language that can open up like a whole new country of people to talk to is much more cool than taking another art class. So it doesn't cost me anything personally.
Yeah. So you don't feel like you're being crowded out of
no,
something that
absolutely
else that
not.
you would really like to do.
Yeah, and I'm in 3 AP classes and 3 honors classes, so it was never a problem to fit it into my schedule. My guidance counselors were always happy to put it in there.
Good. Now, is AP language available at the high school?
We have taught it in the past. We haven't had many requests for it, and as it is now, the level 5, that's what would be replaced then with AP, and most of our students, like Lee, are taking other AP classes, so they're just satisfied with honors level 5 instead of taking the test for it.
Now, what do you know about the what your graduates, particularly those who finish the higher levels of the language, what do you know about what they do with language at the college level and beyond?
Most of my students, when they come back and talk to me, which they do, they come to our functions and they're still very involved in the program, are continuing with German. They don't major, well, Tommy did and graduated.
Found his way back to the major.
He found it, yeah, he found his way back. And, but most of them continue with it, or some of them major. I had another student just graduated in engineering and a minor in German, was a member of the Honor Society at Syracuse University for German. Many of the business majors, those that go into business, will keep German along with their business degree. So most of them do continue with something. And if they don't, then all I hear is, I really miss, I miss German, which is, you know, a great compliment.
Yes, it is.
That they enjoy it. Yeah.
Good. So now, what do you know, Dawn, about the national figures for language study?
Just in researching that a little bit, I did find out more information about Massachusetts than nationally. Here in Massachusetts, 91% of our high schools offer foreign language, but only, I think it was 53% of the middle schools. So I think that's a telling tale. Foreign language is being cut right and left, unfortunately, by other districts. Thank goodness. Our district is amazing. Carol Woodbury is such an amazing supporter of foreign language. She's been a member of the MAFLA, the Massachusetts Foreign Language Association Board of Directors. So she's very influential in keeping foreign language where it is and expanding it now to the elementary schools and as far as we can go. So I think, unfortunately, you know, districts, they are seeing it as, a lot of people see it as not necessary, and that's unfortunate. And I think they'll see a turnaround soon because it's so necessary in our world today with everything that's going on. That the communications stay open, and that's not going to happen if we're all just speaking English and we're speaking it and other people are speaking it as a second language. We're never going to reach the cultural understanding that we need so desperately today. So,
and let's use that as a jumping off point to talk about why we need a cultural understanding and what study of the language does in terms of a cultural understanding. Even if you don't go on an international trip, what happens in terms of cultural understanding in the study of a language? We can all talk about this. I think we all have some experience with it.
Well, the exchanges, of course, provide, you know, firsthand cultural experience, but even those that don't go on our exchanges, we also host students that come over. They're reciprocal exchanges. So a lot of our students have hosted and gotten their cultural experience right here at home.
Let's talk a little bit more about that program. How does it work, and what do you do, and how many students come, and how many of our students go?
We have a wonderful program. It started over, I think, 20 years ago, 10 years before I was here. We have a school in Germany, the school that we now exchange with. I taught at this school before coming here. I lived in Germany for 24 years, and I taught at this high school. So it was an easy connection. When I left there, you know, I said, I'm going to make an exchange, and we'll get going, and we have. So what happens is they come over, and they've started coming over in October because they have a 2-week vacation period that they can hook into their exchange. So they come actually for 3 weeks, but they spend about 10 days of that here at DY. They also go to New York and Washington. And they are placed in families. I know John has hosted, all of you, hosted this year. And they're in the families. We have a Cape Cod trip. We take them through a little of the Cape Cod history down to Provincetown National Seashore. They go into Boston. They go to Plymouth Plantation. They're in the classroom. Then our exchange is then in April, and we go over there. Many of the students stayed with the students that stayed with them. It's not always possible, and that's fine too, because like I said, some of my families only host here and the children don't go. It's all possible. We always find homes for them. They find homes for us when we go. And then we also have, when we go on the exchange, we also have usually a 2 to 3 day excursion someplace else. This year it was to the Black Forest. And then 2 nights on the Rhine River with a Rhine boat cruise. Yeah, and the kids our kids also attended school, and they have a lot of interaction, friendships that have grown over the years. I know Ann Nell, who's now principal at Mattakees, her son went on the German exchange. They've been to the weddings. They've been best man, and so there are real connections that form from these exchanges.
Families build. And so how many students participate typically in each direction?
I usually take, I've taken as few as 7 in 1 year, but as many as 18. So it fluctuates. This year was 10. That's probably about average. 10 to 15 would be a normal exchange. And they usually bring about 15 students over. Yeah.
So those of you who went on the trip this year, tell us what you got out of it. What were the highlights, and what were the benefits for you?
I think a quick thought would be of the food. Of course, the food. I, being it my second trip, I was able to introduce them to a lot of new foods that I was introduced to the first time I went, and it was very interesting to see their first reactions to it when I had already known about them, and like the food, like it was just.
So tell us what food you like. What German food?
The first thing I guess you'd say is just right up at the top of the list is Döner. It's, if you can pronounce it right, it's just a series of meats within a wrap, and it's usually with like a salad that it goes with, and the interesting way they produce it is that like when they cook it, it's on a rotisserie, but they just shave it off, every time somebody orders it, and so it just keeps it, evenly cooked throughout the entire day. So we'd have it every chance we got, and I never stopped enjoying it.
Yeah. How about you?
What just struck me was how pretty it was. I know that sounds lame, but just when it's so different, because Frau said, oh, you're going to be staying in different villages, and to us villages means, oh, you mean like Barnstable, but like they're really villages, like a group of houses, and then just hills, drive like 15 minutes, and then you got another group of houses. So the way that everything's set up is just, it's so different, but you can tell like there's so much more history there than there is here, just because of how old the country is, and it's just so neat to see the different ways that they live, and even the way that the buildings are built with the bricks and everything. Everything was just so breathtaking to me, and I loved it.
It is surprising when you go to Europe for the first time and you think, oh, these houses on Cape Cod really aren't so old.
Yeah, exactly.
So it changes your sense of time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Now, so you were visiting in a fairly rural area?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a winemaking area, so there were vineyards. That is the major product from that area. But yeah, I would say it's an excellent exchange because the match of the people is the same. They're the same kind of hardworking individuals. Relatively, yeah. I think it's just a great match for Cape Cod. I think it's hard. It would be hard for us to go to a big city or because we really are a little provincial village life. Yeah, that we have here on Cape Cod. That's so idyllic, and they have the German version.
What were your
village
impressions, Dylan?
Of Germany?
Yes, and what was your sense of what you absorbed?
I
from
liked
the
a lot
culture?
when we stayed in the Rhine. We stayed in, it was a castle that was converted to a youth hostel. So it was actually on a hill, and you could see the river from any wall of the castle you went to. And all along the river, there was just hills with wine vineyards and everything all the way around it. And it was good. Where we originally stayed in the houses, I was, I think, 3 or 4 villages away from the center, Alzey, and like she said, it is a village, and then you can have a little tiny road, a very thin road, with very high speed limits, and you'll get to another one, and then it's like sort of like hopping. That's what it's like, hopping along the hills, and you're surrounded by vineyards. You look either way, and just wine everywhere.
What was the experience of going to the schools like?
It was a lot different. The teachers, it seemed like they had more freedom.
The teachers had more freedom?
They'd come in late. Like when my first class was actually I believe it was a philosophy class, which we don't have philosophy over here. And we were just sitting there waiting. 5 minutes later, the teacher comes in, and he gives us this, he gives the class a whole lecture, and it's a very involved thing. And then the next class, we went downstairs, and it was the same teacher, but about 20 minutes into when everyone else was in the class waiting, he finally showed up. And I mean, he was a good teacher. It was, I kind of learned a little bit because I could understand what they were talking about.
I was going to ask you how you managed in school since you don't study German.
They worked a lot on chalkboards, so I could understand some of the stuff from the writings. And I understood some names. Some names are common. Like they were talking about Freud a little bit. And they had some little anecdotes from the Bible they were talking about. But anything else, I would just I would ask the girl that hosted me what they were talking about, and she'd have to translate and explain and everything.
One thing I thought was pretty neat was that I was in a music class with my host, and what they spent for most of the time was examining like the style of an opera, like everything about it, like the lyrics and like the different notes that would be involved. And it was interesting to see how, despite different languages, like they're still formatted the same, and like there's always stuff like that between languages that still link each other together. And like how you said, we're both hardworking societies. It seems like as soon as we got off the train to meet our hosts, my host was like, "Is it okay if we go meet some kids and hang with them?" And I was sure. So I spent like the first 3 hours in Germany, like playing at this little community service group and playing soccer with some kids. And it was just neat how all the way across the world, I'm still just doing these little trivial activities with these kids. It's really nice.
So there are some things that are common
Yes.
across cultures that you learned that. Yeah. What was your experience in school?
I actually spent most of my day in English classes. Those were my favorite parts. But I just remember being so shocked because sitting in the English classes, they're studying Shakespeare, they're annotating Shakespearean language, they're doing presentations on Emily Dickinson poems. So it's not like the vocab list, like how do you say hello? Like it's in very involved English, like what I do in my English classes, and this is my first language. So I was so impressed with the level of English they have, and it would be so awesome if we could start languages from what they do in the 5th grade and continue it up until now, because I would love to have that level of proficiency in another language because it really changes someone's life.
So for the two of you who don't study German, what was your social interaction like? Was that difficult in some way, or were your hosts proficient in English?
My host, she was very proficient in English. It wasn't difficult to communicate with her. With some of her friends who don't study English as much as her, it was a little more difficult. And as for I was saying, like, why study another language when everyone speaks English? Well, they do speak English, but in a way, if you don't speak their language, they automatically not look down on you, but they're just like, oh, well, it's kind of like almost a little bit of a disappointment. So going on this trip really made me wish that I took German, and I really would love to take German in my future studies because this trip really inspired me to want to learn the language so I could go back there because I loved it so much.
Does the school, this is changing the subject a little bit, but does the school offer comparable trips to Spain or France or Latin America?
We have in the past. We have had an exchange to Spain. We also had an exchange to France that Dylan participated in last year. That's a relatively new program. Again, one of our French teachers went to France on a Fulbright. We had actually had a teacher exchange, so the French teacher came here and she lived here for a year and taught in her position, and Madame Boyle went to France, and so we've started an exchange with that school. Just like me having taught in the one school, that's what we've done with France. So that runs every other year. So I believe there's an exchange plan for next year. It was last year was the first year for the French exchange. We've had other trips before to France, but we do like to have that exchange element. I really believe that that's a lot of it. That's, you know, that again, that cultural one-on-one, because you're living in a family, you're communicating, trying to communicate with them. That's a whole nother level, I think, of language learning. That a trip, of course, you can see what's going on, but I'd rather have, like Lee said, yeah, now I want to learn German because I want to know what they were saying. You know, I want to be able to communicate with them, and that does come from my exchanges, and that's why I also have students who don't take German that go on my exchange. And one of them is going to take, she was a junior this year, she's going to take German next year because that just grabbed her interest, right?
Yeah, that's
so.
good. I'm interested in the living arrangement in the exchange and the interactions between the students and the parents, whether we're talking about here or there. And you gave the example of Ann Nell and her family really building a relationship that was family-wide. But what's that like for you to go and live with adults who speak another language?
Well, I was actually surprised at how well my host mother spoke English, because I was almost expecting her to not to, because I don't know, I had an impression that it was a new wave thing that the kids learn English from such a young age, but she worked, like John said, in the business world, so she picked up English, but it was easy to communicate with her, and she was really welcoming and friendly, so it was actually a really nice experience, because you not only communicate with your host, but you're able to communicate with her mom and learn what life is like from someone older than you.
How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, the parents definitely seemed like well aware of, you know, the English language, and they did like there were a few times where they'd like during dinner or so, like the family would talk in German, and I'd fall behind. I'm not totally keen on it, but I'd fall behind, and from time to time she'd catch me up. But usually, like if we were hanging around the house or something, like they'd keep the conversation in English, surprisingly, and it was a bit easier to get to know them more and converse with them more. But I think it would have been nice to just really try to push my my skill of knowing German, see how much I could follow up with.
That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and that was, since you were the German student at the time, how much did you really speak German over there, and how well could you function?
Since I was the oldest one in the group that's took German throughout all the years, I tended to be the one that spoke in public to other people, when ordering food and everything. But
that's a good experience.
Yeah, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, because when I went 2 years ago as well, a friend of mine who was the senior that knew the language more than anyone else, he was leading us kind of through it. He had been on the trip before as well. So I definitely felt kind of a similarity between roles there, and it was nice to be able to kind of teach them, show them the way a little bit on some everyday vocab.
And I suspect that if you stayed for a month or so, people wouldn't need to be explaining to you what you'd missed, because you wouldn't be missing anything.
Absolutely, that, and just as it seemed as though as the trip went along, I was remembering a lot more things. So it was when I first got there, it was I was having such a tough time saying thinking in German.
Yes.
But then on our plane back, it was I totally forgot the flight attendants were American. So I was oh, danke, as if they knew. But
yes. Well, they probably did too.
Yeah.
And Dylan, since you're a student of another language, how quickly do you think you would have picked up German if you decided to stay for 6 months?
6 months, I think pretty quickly. I started to pick up a couple things, basic commands, asking for some things, articles, Steckdosel and outlet. When my host didn't know a word in English, then she'd point to something and I'd be able to explain it to her, and then I would learn the word in German and she would learn it in English. I feel if I was actively attempting, if I needed to learn the language, I would have picked it up a lot quicker. There was just, she was writing a paper too on A Midnight Summer's Dream for Shakespeare, and she was asking me for help with some things on translations of some things. She would be using Google Translate and the words wouldn't come out right, because sometimes English, it's kind of hard. One word will mean 5 different things. So I was helping her out with those words, and I'd be learning the same one simultaneously in German, what word to use. So I feel like I would have picked it up pretty quickly.
Good. Lee?
I think that he picked it up quicker than anybody else. I think he knew as much as John by the end of the trip. But I think I definitely would have too. Having taken so many languages, you kind of get the basis of how each language is formed, and just being around there. I know I said, like John said, I said danke for a week after I got back, because it's just a reflex and Gesundheit and stuff like that. But I think that's the best way to learn a language, is to go to the country, definitely.
Now, I wanted to go back to your comments about the level of study that was going on in the German schools. What do you think the students from Germany who came to visit us would have said about what they observed in our schools? Did you talk to them about that?
Yeah, I know I hosted a German girl when she came here, and she, because they were doing so many things, like Frau said, she wasn't in every single class of mine. She went to a math class of mine, and I'm not in a super high level math class, but I remember her saying, "Is this all you do?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry." It wasn't like elementary algebra, but it wasn't like advanced calculus. But she was like, "Is that really it?" I feel like their school is much more exigent than ours. I feel like they definitely, I don't know what the setup is, but I was just so amazed at all they do. And it seems like they have so many breaks and their classes are so much shorter than ours, but somehow they get so much in, and I was really surprised at that.
Maybe you can answer
Yeah.
that for us, Dawn.
The system, of course, is a tier. It's a different system. It's a 3-track system. So the school that we are exchanging with is the college-bound track. So these students are the best of all of the students, and they're going to go through 12 and a half years, and they have to pass state exams, which are similar to college exams. So they are further than what we are. But again, their science and their math programs are not course-wise like they are here. Like you'll take geometry, and then you'll take algebra 2, and we have courses. Their math program runs straight through. So they'll have geometry every year, a piece of geometry.
So it's an integrated math.
Right, that relates to the algebra that you're using, that relates to the calculus that you're, and the same thing in science, for example. They'll have biology, chemistry, and physics within 1 year, but they'll have the chemistry that fits their biology program, what they're doing, and then they'll have the physics part of it. So it's a little bit different, and they do tend to make it. So their high school diploma is similar to a year and a half of college when they're done.
And so then, is their college program 3 years?
No, their college program, their college, that's where, it's interesting because the high school is pretty intense.
Yes.
If you're in that track to go to college, and once you get to college, they tend to take their time. They have academic privileges that many German students do not finish before the age of 25 to 28.
With their first degree.
Yeah, with their degree, because they take their time there. But the high school is definitely intense. The gymnasium, they have to pick majors. They have major courses for 11th and 12th and 12 and a half. So just like they would in college.
And so then the other 2 tracks are more general education and vocational?
Right. The other track would end at the 10th grade. That's more, vocational, although it does include things like nursing is not a university degree. Some elementary school teacher, for example, could also go from the 10th grade to a teaching college. And the lowest track, which they are now integrating because they have education reform just like we do, and the lowest track used to go till the 9th grade, and then it was primarily trades as well as businesses. They have apprenticeships though for everything. Even a waitress at a restaurant would have a complete apprenticeship in that, or a shoe salesman would have an apprenticeship in selling shoes, and a 3-year apprenticeship, be certified. Wow. So, that's a whole nother world that we no longer really have. Although we have our technical schools that offer that somewhat.
I just was reading an article about employers' perceptions of liberal arts education, and one of the strongest outcomes was that the fact that they want their employees to have liberal arts and broad education, but they also want them to have very real-world knowledge of what they're going to do as employees, and so that to me means more in the way of apprenticeships and internships and practice at the college level. Tommy, can you tell us a little bit about what it was about the study of German in high school that brought you back to it eventually, and what brought you to teaching?
I guess for one thing, it was something I did well at, which I think everyone should go for something that they enjoy and do well at.
Sure.
It was, I mean, I guess to go on a slight tangent here, I started at Northeastern University studying criminal justice, so I was on a very different track, you know, nothing related to teaching or foreign language. And I noticed, I guess, when I was there that I was pretty disappointed that their German courses, I think, only went to an intermediate level. And yeah, it's just something that I think once you have it, you keep it. And I don't know. I kept, you know, every year I came back and visited Don.
I was going to say, yeah.
You know, it was just this
yes.
natural kind of, you know, magnetism. I gotta go back to my German class.
Yeah, he kept coming back and saying, I don't know, you know, what I'm doing right now is, I don't think it's really what I want to do. And I really still like German.
Yeah. And I studied abroad in college. I went to a town called Tübingen, which is in southwest Germany. I guess, you know, it's closer to the Black Forest in relation to our recent trip. But, you know, to go over there and meet all these people from all over the world, you know, Portugal, Slovakia, England, Ireland, the United States, Japan, China, and they're all in Tübingen because something in their life made them want to study German, and that it was kind of spooky to be around these people who were so similar to me, and I had never really met as many of them from all over the place before, and just to, you know, so what do you do? Well, I study German, you know, and some of those people are, you know, still my best friends. You know, the study of German has made me, you know, lifelong friends and contacts, and, you know, I guess.
Do you have any aspirations to do an exchange as a teacher? I don't mean just a 2 or 3 week thing, but go and teach for a year.
I'd be interested in it, you know. I would, you know, possibly down the road even be interested in teaching English in Germany or something like that, or, you know. I'm not really too sure where I'm going to go from here necessarily.
I mean, it seems to me that one of the really positive outcomes of the study of a foreign language is that it does give you the courage and the interest in living someplace else too, and just experiencing what it's like to really be enmeshed in another culture. And you obviously did that for 24 years.
24 years, yeah. I started out too as an exchange student out of high school. I went and lived in Germany for a year on a pig farm in the north. It was wonderful. We actually did an exchange to there. That was your last exchange, right? We went up and visited my family. My German family invited us all up, so I carted all these 12 students, and we arrived at the pig farm, and they took care of us. So that was my first start, and then my bachelor's degree is in animal science. So I kind of, you know, yeah, well, yeah, exactly. That's why I got along so well at the pig farm, because that's what I wanted to do. And kind of like Tommy, I did that. I completed my degree, and I was still, but I took a lot of German because I had learned it while I was there. And but I had no record of it ever on my transcripts, so I kept it up, and then, yeah, I had the possibility to teach. I taught at 4Cs for a semester, and then went back and got my master's degree in German. So yeah, there are a lot of possibilities, and I always try to tell my students, you know, remain flexible, because you never know when you're going to use that, when it's going to come up. I never would have thought. And if you asked any of my high school friends, I didn't even take German in high school, so there was no way that I would have known I was going to be involved in language teaching.
We're coming to the end of the program, so I want to ask one more question of the students quickly, and that is, what would you say to students who take their 2 required years of language and then say, I'm not doing any more?
I'd say after only 2 years, you've barely gotten into what it's really about, and like what you barely gotten to know what the culture was, because I think without even going to Germany, like I barely knew it. I barely knew what was going on over there, and until you get like really interested and really into it, it takes some time, but once you finally kind of get that feeling for a country and its language, you don't want to forget it. So.
And then there's always another country and another language.
Exactly.
Good. That concludes our show for today. Thank you very much for joining me. We hope that our discussion has provided you with new information and good insights that broaden your own education. If you want to learn more about what we do as DYSOS and get access to additional information on education, you can access our blog at dysos.wordpress.com. Thanks again to the panelists for making this show so informative and interesting, and especially to students who have the courage to come out and make a show like this. Our sincere gratitude to the staff and the volunteers here at Channel 99 and to our producer, Richard Sentner, for making these shows possible. And thanks to the audience for watching.